The rain drummed steadily against the corrugated metal roof as Ilara Voss sorted through the last of her grandfather's belongings. The old workshop smelled of machine oil, copper wire, and decades of tinkering. 3 months after his passing, she'd finally mustered the courage to clean out this sanctuary of innovation where her grandfather, Professor Julian Voss, had spent most of his life. "I swear, Grandpa, you never threw anything away," she muttered, lifting a tarp from a workbench covered with half-finished projects. A box of vacuum tubes sat beside modern circuit boards. Notebooks filled with equations and sketches were stacked precariously near jars of screws and bolts dating back decades. Ilara wiped sweat from her brow. At 32, she'd followed in her grandfather's engineering footsteps, though her specialty in aerospace propulsion systems had taken her in a different direction. Still, she recognized the brilliance in the chaos around her. A loud crash from the corner made her jump. "Damn it, Edison." She called out to the orange tabby who'd knocked over a container of ball bearings. The cat merely yawned in response. As Ilara knelt to collect the scattered bearings, her hand brushed against a seam in the floorboards. She paused, running her fingers along what appeared to be a trapdoor. "What were you hiding, Grandpa?" she whispered, prying it open. Inside lay a metal case, its surface etched with geometric patterns unlike anything she'd seen before. No lock secured it, yet the case resisted her attempts to open it until she pressed her palm against a central pattern. With a soft hiss, it opened, revealing a stack of translucent materials resembling both paper and plastic, covered in schematics drawn in luminescent ink. Ilara gasped. The blueprints depicted some kind of device, part mechanical, part something else. Equations ran along the margins in her grandfather's precise handwriting, but the symbols intermingled with them were unfamiliar. More alarming was the date on the corner, 1978, decades before some of these theoretical concepts had even been proposed. "This isn't possible," she murmured, pulling out her phone. "Marcus needs to see this." Dr. Marcus Reed arrived at the workshop an hour later, shaking rain from his umbrella. His tall frame and disheveled appearance contrasted with his reputation as one of the country's leading quantum physicists. "This better be good, Ilara. I was in the middle of." His words died as she spread the blueprints across the workbench. "What am I looking at? You tell me." These were hidden under Grandpa's floor. Marcus adjusted his glasses, leaning closer. "These equations, they're describing quantum entanglement principles we've only theorized in the last 5 years." He traced a finger along one of the diagrams. "And this looks like a prototype for manipulating spacetime at a localized point." "In English, please," Ilara said, though her engineering background had already helped her grasp the implications. "Your grandfather designed a device that could potentially open a gateway to somewhere else. Another dimension, perhaps, or a distant point in our universe." Marcus straightened, running a hand through his dark hair. "The question is, where did he get these ideas in 1978? Some of this mathematics didn't exist then." Ilara tapped her finger against a strange symbol repeated throughout the blueprints. "And what's this? It's not like any engineering notation I've seen." Marcus's expression darkened. "It reminds me of something. There was a classified file circulated among theoretical physicists about 10 years ago. Signal patterns detected from deep space, believed to be artificial in origin. Are you suggesting my grandfather was communicating with aliens?" Ilara laughed, but it sounded hollow even to her own ears. "I'm suggesting something gave him advanced knowledge." Marcus carefully examined the case that had contained the blueprints. "Have you tried building any of this?" "In the 3 hours since I found it?" "No, Marcus, I haven't constructed an interdimensional portal over my afternoon coffee." He smiled at her sarcasm. "Fair enough. But we should. Look at these components. Most of them are accessible with today's technology. Your grandfather may have been decades ahead of his time, but we've caught up." Ilara considered this. Her grandfather had been eccentric but brilliant. If he'd hidden these plans rather than publishing them, he must have had a reason. We need to understand what we're dealing with before building anything. What if it's dangerous? What if it's the greatest discovery in human history? Marcus countered, eyes bright with excitement. Think about it, Ilara. A method of transportation that could make space exploration as we know it obsolete. Instant travel across vast distances. Edison the cat jumped onto the workbench, sniffing at the blueprints. Ilara gently shooed him away. Grandpa kept this hidden for a reason. We need to proceed carefully. Over the next 2 weeks, Ilara and Marcus devoted every spare moment to deciphering the blueprints. They converted Julian Voss's workshop into their research center, setting up computers and equipment borrowed from Marcus's university lab. The central component appeared to be a crystalline structure that would focus and amplify energy in specific patterns. According to the equations, this would create a stable wormhole, a concept that had remained theoretical until now. Your grandfather's notes mentioned something called resonance material, Marcus said one evening as they worked late. Rain continued to pound outside, as if the weather itself was trying to isolate them from the world. Any idea what that might be? Ilara rubbed her tired eyes. Actually, yes. Follow me. She led him to the workshop's back room, where larger equipment was stored. Behind an old lathe sat a safe. I found this the day after discovering the blueprints. The combination was my birthday. Inside the safe was a small container labeled Aristarchus Sample, 1972. Within it sat a fragment of what looked like black crystal, shot through with veins of blue luminescence. When Ilara lifted it, the blue light pulsed faintly. It's warm, she noted, placing it in Marcus's palm. He examined it with growing astonishment. This isn't a terrestrial material. The molecular structure, it's responding to your touch, Ilara. The luminescence increased when you held it. That's impossible. It's just a rock. A rock that glows blue, feels warm to the touch, and responds to human contact. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Where did your grandfather say he found this? Aristarchus is a crater on the moon, Ilara said quietly. Grandpa consulted for NASA after Apollo 17. He never mentioned bringing anything back. Marcus carefully returned the fragment to its container. We need to run tests on this before proceeding further. If this is the resonance material referenced in the blueprints, it's the key component. The following day, they set up a makeshift lab to analyze the fragment. Marcus brought specialized equipment from his university, telling colleagues he was conducting private research for a tech startup. The molecular structure is unlike anything in our periodic table, he announced after hours of testing. It contains elements we can't identify, and its energy signature fluctuates in patterns that almost seem intelligent. Ilara, who had been assembling components according to her grandfather's designs, looked up sharply. Are you saying the rock is alive? Not alive in a biological sense, but responsive. It's as if it was designed to interact with specific energy patterns. Marcus showed her a screen displaying wavelengths. When exposed to the frequencies specified in your grandfather's notes, it amplifies them exponentially. As the final pieces of their prototype came together, Ilara couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. They were venturing into territory far beyond established science, guided by blueprints of mysterious origin. On the night they completed the initial assembly, a thunderstorm raged outside. The workshop's lights flickered as lightning struck nearby. Perfect atmosphere for mad scientists, Marcus joked nervously as they prepared for their first test. The device, which they nicknamed the Quantum Vault, sat on the workbench. It resembled a complex gyroscope surrounding the resonance crystal, which they'd carefully mounted at its center. According to the blueprints, activating it would create a small, controlled distortion in spacetime. Nothing dangerous, just proof that the concept worked. Power levels at 20%, Ilara announced, monitoring the equipment. Initiating resonance sequence, Marcus stood ready at the control panel they'd constructed, beginning quantum alignment. As they activated the device, the crystal's blue veins brightened. A low hum filled the workshop, rising in pitch. The air around the quantum vault seemed to shimmer, like heat waves rising from hot asphalt. Energy signatures are stable, Marcus reported, excitement evident in his voice. The resonance is. The crystal suddenly flashed brilliantly, bathing the workshop in blue light. The humming intensified, and for a moment, the air directly above the device appeared to fold inward, creating a tiny point of absolute darkness. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the phenomenon collapsed. The crystal's glow faded to its normal luminescence, and the humming subsided. Ilara and Marcus stared at each other, stunned. "Did we just?" Ilara began. "Create a microscopic wormhole." "Yes, I believe we did." Marcus's hands trembled as he checked the readings. It was stable for 3.7 seconds. Outside, the storm had suddenly ceased. The abrupt silence was broken only by a faint, rhythmic beeping from the crystal. It pulsed with new intensity, as if awakened. "It's transmitting," Ilara realized with growing alarm. "Marcus, it's sending a signal." Before they could respond, all electronic equipment in the workshop went dead. The computers, lights, even their phones. Everything powered down simultaneously. In the darkness, only the crystal continued to glow, its pulsing light casting long shadows across the walls of the workshop. And somewhere, far beyond Earth, something had received its call. The awakening signal. 3 days after their experiment, Ilara and Marcus worked frantically to understand what they had unleashed. The workshop had been transformed into a makeshift command center with new equipment brought in after the mysterious power failure. "The signal is still transmitting," Ilara said, monitoring a specialized frequency scanner they constructed. "It's cycling through patterns every 17 minutes, like clockwork." Marcus looked up from his laptop. Dark circles shadowed his eyes from lack of sleep. "I've analyzed the radiation signature. Whatever quantum doorway we briefly opened, it created a subspace ripple that's still propagating outward." A soft rain tapped against the windows as Edison the cat prowled restlessly around the workshop, occasionally pawing at the containment box, where they now kept the resonance crystal. "He's been doing that since the experiment," Ilara observed. "Animals sense things we can't." The crystal's pulsing had settled into a steady rhythm, casting eerie blue reflections across the workshop's cluttered surfaces. They'd discovered it was generating minute amounts of an unknown energy, enough to power itself, but nothing more. "We need to consider the possibility that we've activated an ancient beacon," Marcus said, closing his laptop. "Your grandfather's notes mentioned coordinates, not terrestrial ones, but stellar positions." Ilara spread out the original blueprints, which now seemed to shimmer slightly under direct light. "I've been translating more of these symbols using the cipher program. This section here describes the device as a nexus key. At least that's the closest English equivalent." A sharp knock at the workshop door made them both jump. "Expecting anyone?" Marcus whispered. Ilara shook her head, quickly covering the device with a tarp. She approached the door cautiously and peered through a small window. Outside stood a woman in a crisp black suit, flanked by 2 men with military posture despite their civilian clothes. The woman held up a badge. "Department of Energy, Advanced Research Division," she announced when Ilara cracked open the door. "I'm Agent Vivian Keller. We need to speak with you about unusual energy readings detected from this location." Ilara's heart raced. "I'm not sure what you're referring to. This is just my grandfather's old workshop." Agent Keller's expression remained impassive. "Dr. Voss, we're aware of your grandfather's unique research history. We're also tracking an anomalous signal emanating from these coordinates. May we come in?" Before Ilara could respond, the crystal beneath the tarp began to pulse more intensely. The lights in the workshop flickered, and Agent Keller's hand moved instinctively toward her jacket. "What's happening in there?" she demanded. "Just some electrical issues with the old wiring," Marcus called out, frantically trying to stabilize the device. Suddenly, a high-pitched tone pierced the air. Everyone clutched their ears as the crystal's light became blindingly bright, visible even through the tarp. For 3 seconds, gravity seemed to waver, Tools floated momentarily before crashing back down. In the confusion, one of Agent Keller's companions forced the door open. "Secure the device," she ordered. As the agents rushed in, the workshop's roof seemed to ripple like water. Through the transparent distortion, Ilara glimpsed what appeared to be stars, but not in familiar constellations. For one breathtaking moment, she was looking through a window into deep space. Then reality snapped back. The crystal's light dimmed to its normal glow, and the strange phenomena ceased. The silence that followed was deafening. Agent Keller recovered first, straightening her jacket. "Dr. Voss, Dr. Reed, you've stumbled onto something far more significant than you realize. This project is now under federal jurisdiction. You can't just take our research," Ilara protested. "Actually, we can," Keller replied, producing documents from her briefcase. "Your grandfather's work has been of interest to us for decades. We simply lost track of certain artifacts after his death." As the agents moved to secure the workshop, a shadow passed over the window, too large for a bird, too silent for an aircraft. Only Ilara noticed it, a momentary darkness against the cloudy sky. While Agent Keller inventoried their equipment, Marcus whispered to Ilara, "They were expecting this. They've been watching all along." Ilara nodded slightly, her mind racing. Whatever they had activated was more important than she'd imagined, important enough for immediate government intervention. But something told her the government wasn't the only party now interested in their discovery. Outside, perched invisibly on the workshop's roof, a being from beyond Earth observed the unfolding scene with ancient eyes, recognizing the first tentative steps of a species on the verge of a cosmic awakening. The Guardian's challenge. "They've been here for 36 hours, Ilara whispered, watching the government vehicles parked outside the workshop. She and Marcus had retreated to her apartment after Agent Keller had temporarily secured their research site. "They've taken everything except the blueprints we managed to hide." Marcus paced the small living room, running calculations on a tablet. The resonance pattern was completing a cycle when the anomaly occurred. "I think the crystal was responding to something, or someone, answering its signal." A soft tapping sound drew their attention to the balcony window. Edison the cat arched his back, hissing at something outside. "Probably just a branch," Ilara said, though no trees grew near her third-floor apartment. The tapping came again, more insistent. Marcus cautiously approached the window and pulled back the curtain. Floating outside, impossibly given the 30-foot drop below, was a small spherical object about the size of a baseball. Its metallic surface rippled with iridescent patterns that seemed to shift between liquid and solid states. "Ilara," Marcus breathed, "we have a visitor." The sphere hovered patiently, making no aggressive movements. After a moment's hesitation, Ilara unlatched the window. The object drifted inside, emitting a soft blue glow identical to the resonance crystals. It floated to the center of the room and projected a holographic image, a humanoid figure with elongated proportions and features that seemed deliberately obscured, as if the projection was being filtered for human comprehension. "Greetings, awakeners," the figure spoke in a voice that seemed to bypass their ears and resonate directly in their minds. "I am Sentinel, observer of the Ardarian Accord. You have activated a nexus key, signaling your species' readiness for evaluation." Ilara found her voice first. "Evaluation for what?" "For inclusion," Sentinel replied. "Your ancestor Julian Voss discovered our monitoring outpost during your Apollo missions. We granted him partial knowledge, curious to see if humanity would pursue wisdom or weaponry." Marcus stepped forward. "The government agents seek dominance through control of the gateway," Sentinel interrupted. "This is expected but concerning. The universe exists in delicate balance. New spacefaring species must demonstrate responsibility before accessing the network." The hologram expanded, showing star systems connected by glowing pathways. "The quantum nexus links civilizations across 12 galaxies. Access requires passing the Ardarian trials, tests of ethics, wisdom, and technological restraint. And if we fail? Ilara asked. The hologram shifted to show a planet surrounded by defensive barriers. Isolation until evolutionary maturity. Many species require multiple attempts across millennia. Edison approached the sphere cautiously, batting at it with a paw. Sentinel's projection flickered momentarily. Your companion senses my true nature, the being noted with what sounded like amusement. Animals often perceive beyond technological limitations. Sentinel's image grew more serious. You have activated the first trial by successfully constructing a resonance device. The Ardarians left 7 trials scattered throughout your solar system. Complete them before others weaponize the technology, and humanity may join the galactic community. How do we find these trials without the crystal? Marcus asked. In response, the sphere split open, revealing a smaller version of the resonance crystal. This will guide you. The first challenge awaits where your world's magnetic forces converge. The North Pole. Ilara guessed. A beginning. Sentinel acknowledged. I cannot intervene directly. Observation only is permitted. But know that others watch your progress with great interest. Some hope for your success. Others fear it. Before they could ask more questions, the sphere reconstructed itself around the small crystal and dropped gently into Ilara's hands. You have 13 lunar cycles to complete the trials. Sentinel's voice faded. Choose allies carefully. Not all who appear human retain humanity's interests at heart. The projection vanished, leaving Ilara and Marcus staring at the sphere, which had become dormant except for a faint directional pulse pointing northward. Outside, a black sedan pulled up alongside the government vehicles. A figure stepped out, gazing up at Ilara's window with eyes that reflected the moonlight in ways no human eye should. The race to determine humanity's cosmic fate had begun. The Cosmic Alliance. We're approaching the coordinates, the pilot announced as their small aircraft flew over the vast Arctic ice sheet. After 3 weeks of evading government agents and securing private transportation through Marcus's academic connections, they had finally reached their destination. Below them stretched an endless expanse of white, broken only by occasional pressure ridges and the distant sparkle of open water. The miniature resonance crystal pulsed more rapidly as they descended, its blue glow intensifying. The signal strongest about 2 kilometers east, Ilara said, consulting the navigation system they'd jury-rigged to interpret the crystal's emissions. She glanced at Marcus, who was examining satellite imagery on his tablet. Any sign of Keller's team? Nothing recent, but they can't be far behind. My contact at the university says there's been unusual chatter about Project Nexus on secured channels. The plane touched down on a makeshift ice runway. Outside, the temperature hovered at minus 30 degrees Celsius, the air so cold it burned their lungs. They quickly donned their thermal gear and loaded essential equipment onto sleds. The sphere's behaving strangely, Marcus noted as they trekked across the ice. The alien device that Sentinel had left them now rotated slowly in midair, occasionally emitting soft pulses of light that melted small depressions in the snow beneath it. After an hour of difficult travel, they reached a perfectly circular formation in the ice, too symmetrical to be natural. The sphere accelerated suddenly, shooting forward and hovering above the center of the circle. It's marking the spot, Ilara said, approaching cautiously. As she stepped onto the circular formation, the ice beneath her boots began to glow with the same blue luminescence as the crystal. Geometric patterns spread outward from her footsteps, forming intricate symbols similar to those on the original blueprints. The entire circle, nearly 50 meters in diameter, illuminated in a dazzling display of light. It's scanning us, Marcus realized as tendrils of energy rose from the pattern, enveloping them in a gentle blue nimbus. Some kind of recognition protocol. A voice echoed across the ice, seemingly emanating from the patterns themselves. Genetic concordance confirmed. Trial of perception commences. The ice beneath them became transparent, revealing an enormous structure buried hundreds of meters below. a massive crystalline dome housing what appeared to be a self-contained ecosystem. Before they could react, the surface dissolved beneath their feet. Instead of plunging into freezing water, they found themselves descending slowly through a controlled gravitational field, coming to rest inside the dome. Warm, humid air greeted them. Lush vegetation unlike anything on Earth grew throughout the enclosure. At its center stood a towering obelisk covered in the now familiar Ardarian script. "Welcome, Awakeners," came Sentinel's voice, though the entity remained unseen. This outpost was established 30,000 Earth years ago to monitor your species' development. Complete the trial of perception, and the path to the remaining challenges will be revealed. The obelisk projected a series of increasingly complex three-dimensional patterns into the air. "Observe and reproduce," Sentinel instructed. "Perceive what exists beyond obvious dimensions." For hours, Ilara and Marcus worked to decipher and recreate the patterns using the sphere's interface. Each successful completion revealed fragments of Earth's previously unknown history, interactions with ancient visitors, evidence of guided evolutionary nudges, and glimpses of humanity's potential futures. "It's testing our ability to perceive reality beyond our limited human perspective," Marcus said, his voice filled with wonder. "To see connections across time and space." As they completed the final sequence, the obelisk split open, revealing a larger, more complex resonance crystal within. The sphere absorbed this new component, growing slightly in size and complexity. "First trial completed," Sentinel announced. "You have demonstrated perceptual flexibility, essential for species entering the galactic community." Suddenly, alarms echoed through the dome. Sentinel's voice became urgent. "Others have located this facility. Their intentions register as hostile." Outside, they heard the distant thrum of helicopters. "Agent Keller?" Ilara asked. "Not human," came Sentinel's disturbing reply. "Your government agents now serve entities opposed to Earth's inclusion. They seek to ensure humanity remains isolated and eventually self-destructs as resources for galactic expansion." The dome's exterior projected an image of the ice surface above. 3 black helicopters were landing, and figures in Arctic gear were deploying what looked like drilling equipment. "You must proceed to the second trial," Sentinel urged. "It awaits in the depths where your planet's molten core meets its greatest ocean trench. The knowledge gained here will transport you." As the sounds of drilling intensified, the sphere expanded around Ilara and Marcus, encasing them in a protective bubble. Edison, who had insisted on accompanying them despite the harsh environment, pressed against Ilara's leg. "Prepare for quantum displacement," Sentinel warned. The last thing they saw before the world dissolved around them was the dome's ceiling breaching, and figures with eerily elongated limbs and reflective eyes descending through the opening, creatures wearing human forms like ill-fitting masks. Then they were falling through darkness, the sphere carrying them toward the ocean depths where the next trial awaited, and where the true scope of the cosmic conflict surrounding Earth's future would finally be revealed. Humanity's choice. Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, in the shadowy realm of the Mariana Trench, Ilara, Marcus, and Edison materialized inside a massive underwater structure. The protective sphere dissolved, leaving them in a cavernous chamber lit by bioluminescent organisms that clung to curved walls of unknown material. 11 kilometers down, Marcus whispered, checking a pressure gauge that impossibly read normal atmospheric levels. "We should be crushed, yet." "Advanced containment field," Ilara surmised, touching the wall. It felt warm, almost alive. "The Ardarians built this here to hide it from detection." Edison prowled the perimeter, seemingly untroubled by their instantaneous transportation across thousands of kilometers. The small resonance crystal now pulsed with multiple colors, projecting a holographic map of Earth with 6 glowing points. "We've completed one trial," Ilara noted, pointing to a deactivated point near the Arctic. "And we're at the second." 4 more locations glowed across the planet: the Sahara Desert, Antarctica, the Amazon Basin, and a point in low Earth orbit. A pool of luminescent liquid in the center of the chamber began to ripple. From its depths rose Sentinel, now manifesting as a translucent, vaguely humanoid figure composed of light and fluid. "The pursuit forces have been temporarily misdirected," Sentinel informed them. "But our window of opportunity narrows. The trial of communion begins." The liquid surface expanded, forming a circular platform. As they stepped onto it, thousands of tiny filaments rose to meet them, gently connecting to their temples. "Collective consciousness is the foundation of advanced civilization," Sentinel explained. "Experience the unified perspective of 100 worlds." What followed was overwhelming. Their minds expanded exponentially, experiencing the collective wisdom of countless species across the cosmos. They witnessed civilizations that had evolved beyond physical form, others that shared consciousness across vast distances, and some that had merged completely with technology. Through it all ran a common thread: the struggle between isolation and connection, fear and trust, conflict and harmony. When the communion ended, Ilara and Marcus fell to their knees, gasping. Edison remained connected longer, his feline consciousness apparently more adaptable to the experience. "The cat comprehends more than you realize," Sentinel observed. "Your companion species have always been more perceptive about cosmic truths." "Those beings in the Arctic," Marcus said, his voice shaking. "What are they?" "The Ravagers," Sentinel replied. "A coalition that believes emerging species should remain quarantined. They infiltrate developing worlds, manipulating governments and resources towards self-destruction. And they've infiltrated Earth's leadership," Ilara concluded. "For centuries," Sentinel confirmed. "They know the trials have been activated and seek to prevent completion." The chamber suddenly trembled. Warning lights pulsed along the walls. "Deep-sea vehicles approach," Sentinel announced. "Military submersibles controlled by compromised humans." "We can't keep running," Ilara said firmly. "Each trial location will be compromised before we arrive. We need to change strategy." She turned to Sentinel. "The quantum vault my grandfather designed. It wasn't just for communication, was it? It can broadcast to all resonance points simultaneously." Sentinel's form flickered in what might have been approval. "You perceive correctly. The final trial was always intended to test whether your species would choose wisdom over power." "We need to return to the workshop," Marcus said. "Rebuild the vault, but amplified. Broadcast the knowledge from these trials globally. Bypass the compromised leadership entirely." "A dangerous gamble," Sentinel warned. "Mass awakening risks panic, conflict." "Better than slow extinction," Ilara countered. "Humanity deserves to choose its own fate." The structure shuddered again as depth charges detonated nearby. "I cannot directly intervene," Sentinel reminded them, "but I can transport you once more. The choice of destination is yours. Continue the trials sequentially or attempt your broadcast strategy." Ilara locked eyes with Marcus, then glanced at Edison, who sat calmly watching the exchange. "Take us home," she decided. "To the workshop." The liquid platform began to glow intensely. As the chamber walls started to breach, the sphere reformed around them. "Remember," Sentinel's voice echoed as they dematerialized, "humanity's greatest strength has always been adaptation. Your species thrives in impossible circumstances." They rematerialized in the workshop, now abandoned by government forces who had moved on to the trial locations. Working frantically, they reconstructed the quantum vault using components Ilara had hidden throughout the property. "The resonance crystal has evolved," Marcus observed, installing it in the central housing. "It's gained complexity from the trials we completed. It's going to broadcast everything we experienced," Ilara said, finalizing the calibrations. "Every human with an electronic device will receive glimpses of what we learned: the Ardarian history, the Ravager infiltration, the cosmic community awaiting us. And the Ravagers will know immediately," Marcus added grimly. Outside, storm clouds gathered unnaturally fast. The wind began to howl as if the atmosphere itself were responding to the impending revelation. "Power levels at maximum," Ilara announced. "Resonance frequencies aligned. Broadcasting in 3, 2, 1. The crystal flared with blinding intensity. For a breathtaking moment, the workshop seemed to exist in multiple places simultaneously, overlapping with the Arctic facility, the ocean trench, and locations they hadn't yet visited. Across the planet, screens flickered. Minds opened to cosmic awareness. Billions experienced momentary communion with something greater than themselves. And in secure facilities worldwide, beings wearing human disguises writhed in agony as their deception became visible to all. The crystal's light eventually subsided. Ilara and Marcus stood motionless, awaiting the world's response. Their phones began to ring simultaneously. Colleagues, friends, strangers, all awakened, all connecting the pieces of humanity's manipulated history. "You have completed the final trial." Sentinel's voice emerged from the now stabilized crystal, not through the prescribed path, but through innovation, humanity's defining trait. The workshop door opened. Agent Keller stood there, her expression transformed from stern authority to humble understanding. "We've been compromised for generations," she said quietly. "But now we see. Worldwide, people are demanding answers. The Ravagers' human collaborators are confessing, their infiltrators exposed." Above the workshop, the storm clouds parted to reveal a massive ship descending, not with hostility, but with diplomatic lights signaling peaceful contact. "The Ardarian Council," Sentinel explained, materializing beside them. "They come to formally invite Earth to join the galactic community." As the ship hovered silently overhead, Ilara realized that humanity stood at its most crucial crossroads. The knowledge they had broadcast had irrevocably changed human civilization. There would be fear and resistance, but also unprecedented unity. Was this the plan all along? She asked Sentinel. "To force our hand into transparency." "The trials always test what species value most," Sentinel replied. "Some choose strength, others knowledge. Humanity chose truth, despite its cost." Edison jumped onto the workbench, pawing at the crystal, which now pulsed in rhythm with the lights of the ship above. "Your journey begins now," Sentinel said as a beam of light enveloped the workshop. "The universe awaits." Ilara took Marcus's hand as they were lifted toward the ship. Humanity's first official ambassadors to the stars, representatives of a species that had chosen to face cosmic truth rather than comfortable isolation. In homes and gathering places worldwide, people looked skyward with new understanding, ready to embrace their place in a universe far more complex, dangerous, and beautiful than they had ever imagined.